In the shadow of Red Hollow, Montana, where the sun scorched the plains until they cracked like old leather, a mother's wail shattered the dawn of 1883. The town square thrummed with raw energy. Horses snorted, their hooves kicking up clouds of rust-red dust, while merchants hollered over tables laden with whiskey barrels and salt sacks. The air was thick with the tang of sweat and greed, a cacophony of cattle lowing and coins clinking like gunfire. But today, beneath a gnarled sycamore twisted by years of wind, a darker trade stole the light. Sarah, a young widow, stood trembling. On a splintered auction block, her 3 toddlers, a boy and 2 girls, all under 3, huddled against her faded green shawl. Her auburn hair, pinned loosely with a wooden hairpin, framed hazel eyes brimming with terror. Her patched muslin dress, once vibrant, hung limp, a silent testament to her husband's gambling debts that had chained her to this moment. The crowd, a sea of weathered faces and tobacco-stained teeth, pressed closer, their jeers rising like a storm. Hank Barraman, a wiry cattle baron with a sneer sharper than a razor, strode to the platform's edge, his polished gray vest flashing silver buttons under a black hat tilted low. His spurs jangled with each step, a chilling rhythm that silenced the murmurs. "Her man owed me $800, he snarled, his voice slicing through the clamor. "Pissed it away at my faro table, then dropped dead in a ditch, hard as broke as his pockets. Now she and her brats are mine to work. Off the debt!" He waved a tattered ledger, its pages yellowed like old bones, his grin cold as a Montana frost. Sarah's son, a frail boy with her hazel eyes, whimpered, tugging her shawl. Her twin daughters, their pigtails unraveling, buried their faces in her skirt, tiny hands clutching the worn fabric. Sarah pulled them close, her voice cracking like dry timber. "They're just babies, Mr. Barraman. They don't owe you a thing. Please, let them go." Her plea hung in the air, fragile and unanswered. Barraman's enforcer, a hulking brute named Cal with a scar splitting his brow, grabbed the boy's arm, yanking him forward. Sarah lunged, her fingers grazing her son's sleeve, but Cal's meaty hand shoved her back. She stumbled, knees slamming. Against the planks, a sharp pain blooming in her chest. "No!" she screamed, voice raw, as the twins were torn from her grasp, their wails piercing the crowd like knives. Blood trickled from Sarah's lip, where Cal's elbow had struck, staining her chin as she reached for her children, hands grasping empty air. Her sobs mingled with the twins' cries, a heartbreaking chorus drowned by the crowd's cruel laughter. A grizzled merchant spat into the dirt, muttering, "Debtor's trash ain't worth the rope." Others jeered, their faces blurring into a haze of scorn, their voices a relentless tide of mockery. Then, a shadow parted the throng. Jonas Cade, a rancher in his early 40s, stepped into the sunlight, his presence quiet but unyielding. His face, weathered like sun-baked clay, was framed by a dark beard streaked with gray, his deep brown eyes holding a storm of unspoken pain. A faded blue bandana hung loose around his neck, tucked beneath a black duster coat that swayed with each measured step. His boots, scuffed but sturdy, crunched the gravel as he approached the auction table. In his calloused hand, he held a hand-carved wooden music box, its lid etched with a delicate crescent moon, the wood polished to a soft sheen. The crowd hushed, their jeers faltering as he set the box down with a soft clink, its weight carrying a challenge that silenced the square. "I'll cover her debt," Jonas said, his voice low but steady, cutting through the tension like a blade. $800. For the woman and her children. The crowd erupted in disbelief. Barraman's eyes narrowed, his smirk curling like smoke. "You, Cade? A dirt-poor wrangler with nothing but dust in your pockets?" He leaned forward, flicking the music box with a bony finger. "This trinket ain't worth a dime." Sniggers rippled through the onlookers, their laughter sharp and mocking. A grizzled miner in a tattered vest elbowed his neighbor, sneering, "That coat's more holes than thread. He's bluffing." From the crowd's edge, a new voice rang out, sharp and fearless. Lila, a wiry saloon girl with fiery red curls spilling from a feathered hat, pushed forward, her patchwork skirt swishing against her boots. Her green eyes blazed with defiance, her lips painted a bold crimson. She'd known Jonas years back, when he'd pulled her from a barroom brawl, never asking a thing in return. "He's good for it, Hank," she called, her voice slicing through the mockery. "Don't play the fool with him." She crossed her arms, daring Barrowman to argue, her presence a spark of loyalty in the sea of scorn. Hank thumbed his ledger, his sneer deepening. 600 by dawn, Cade, or I keep 'em all, and don't think your little toy box changes a damn thing. His gaze flicked to Lila, then back to Jonas, greed glinting in his eyes. "You got till the sun rises." Jonas met Hank's stare, his hand brushing a worn leather pouch at his belt, tied with a red cord, a keepsake from a past he'd buried deep. He didn't flinch at the crowd's taunts, their voices fading into the desert wind. "I'll be back," he said, voice calm but resolute, turning away with deliberate steps. The music box sat alone on the table, its crescent moon catching the sunlight, a fragile promise in a world of greed. On the platform, Sarah lifted her tear-streaked face, her hands still clutching her son. Her gaze locked on Jonas's retreating figure, then drifted to the music box, its soft glow kindling a flicker of hope in her heart. Lila's words echoed in her mind, a lifeline in the chaos. But in a town where promises broke like dry twigs, could a stranger's vow hold against Barrowman's iron grip? What secret lay within Jonas's music box? And would it be enough to save Sarah from a fate worse than death? The dust of Red Hollow's square still swirled as Jonas Cade's boots echoed down the rutted path, the weight of his vow pressing harder than the Montana sun. Behind him, the auction block stood empty, but Sarah's sobs lingered in his ears, like a haunting refrain. The hand-carved music box, its crescent moon glinting faintly, remained on Hank Barrowman's table, a fragile pledge against $600 due by dawn. Jonas's hand grazed the leather pouch at his belt, tied with a red cord, its contents a secret heavier than gold. He had no cash, no cattle to sell, but he'd made a promise, one he'd keep or die trying. On the platform, Sarah clutched her son, her auburn hair falling loose from its wooden hairpin, her green shawl slipping as she tried to shield her. Twins from the crowd's leering eyes. Hank Barrowman's voice rang out sharp as a spur. "Get 'em to my ranch, Cal. They'll sleep in the barn till Cade fails to show." Cal, the scar-faced enforcer, gripped the twins' arms, dragging them toward a creaking wagon. Sarah stumbled after them, her voice a broken whisper. "Please don't hurt them." Her hazel eyes, red from tears, caught a flash of red curls in the crowd. Lila, the saloon girl, weaving through the throng, her patchwork skirt catching the light. Lila's green eyes burned with defiance as she reached Sarah's side, slipping a small folded cloth into her hand, a lace handkerchief embroidered with a tiny bluebird, a token from her own hard-won days. "Hold on, darling," Lila murmured, her voice low but fierce. "Jonas ain't the kind to break his word. You'll see." Sarah's fingers closed around the handkerchief, its softness a stark contrast to the splintered wood beneath her. She nodded, barely daring to hope, as Cal shoved her toward the wagon. The triplets' whimpers pierced her heart, their tiny faces pale with fear. As the wagon lurched forward, Sarah's gaze lingered on the music box, its crescent moon a beacon in the chaos. The road to Barrowman's ranch wound through sagebrush and jagged hills, the wagon's wheels groaning under the weight of despair. Sarah sat in the back, her arms wrapped around her children, their small bodies trembling against her tattered muslin dress. The boy pressed his cheek to her shoulder, whispering, "Mama, is that man coming back?" Sarah's throat tightened, her mind replaying Jonas's steady gaze, his black duster swaying like a shield. "I don't know, sweetheart," she murmured, stroking his hair, "but we'll stay together. I promise." Her words felt hollow, drowned by the memory of her husband's broken vows, lost to cards and whiskey. At the ranch, a sprawling spread of barbed wire and weathered barns, Cal herded them into a drafty stable, its air thick with hay and mildew. Sarah pulled her shawl tighter, settling the triplets on a pile of straw, their eyes wide in the dim light. The twins clung to her, their pigtails tangled, while the boy clutched the bluebird handkerchief Lila had given her. Outside, Baraman's laughter echoed, his silver-buttoned vest glinting as he barked orders to his men. Cade's got no chance, he sneered, sipping from a flask. By dawn, they're mine for good. Miles away, Jonas rode his sorrel mare through a narrow canyon, the sun dipping low, painting the rocks blood-red. His gray-streaked beard caught the wind, his blue bandana fluttering against his neck. The leather pouch at his belt held a single item, a folded letter, its edges worn from years of carrying, written in his sister's hand before fever took her. It spoke of a hidden claim, a sliver of land in the hills, rich with silver ore, that Jonas had sworn never to touch. It was his last tie to family, a legacy he'd buried to escape greed's curse. But for Sarah and her children, he'd unearth it, even if it cost him everything. He tethered his horse at the canyon's edge, his boots crunching on gravel as he climbed to a rocky overhang. The stars began to pierce the indigo sky, their light, cold and distant. Kneeling beside a jagged boulder, Jonas pried it loose, revealing a shallow hollow. His hands, rough from years of toil, brushed dirt from a small tin box, its lid rusted but intact. Inside lay a crude map, scrawled with his sister's careful script marking the claim's location. His fingers trembled as he tucked it into his coat, the music box's absence a hollow ache. It had been his sister's too, its melody a lullaby she'd sung to him as a boy. Now it was a gamble to save 4 souls. Back at the ranch, Sarah hummed, softly to her children, a trembling tune from her own childhood, her voice barely holding against the stable's chill. The bluebird handkerchief lay across her son's chest, rising with his shallow breaths. Lila's words echoed in her mind. Jonas ain't the kind to break his word. But trust came hard, worn thin by men who'd promised salvation only, to demand her soul. As the stable door creaked, Sarah's heart leapt, fearing Cal's return. But it was only the wind, rattling the warped boards, a reminder of the long night ahead. Jonas mounted his mare, the tin box secure in his saddlebag, his brown eyes fixed on the horizon. Dawn was hours away, and Red Hollow's hills held dangers. Beyond Baraman's greed, bandits, storms or worse. Yet Sarah's face, etched with courage despite her tears, burned in his mind, urging him forward. Could Jonas unearth the silver in time, or would Sarah's fragile hope crumble before the sun rose? The Montana night pressed heavy on Red Hollow, its stars hidden behind a veil of clouds, as if the heavens themselves held their breath. In the drafty stable of Hank Baraman's ranch, Sarah sat hunched on a bed of straw, her 3 toddlers curled against her faded green shawl. The stable's mildew stung her nose, its warped boards creaking with every gust of wind. Her auburn hair clung to her tear-streaked cheeks, the wooden hairpin barely holding it back. She clutched the bluebird handkerchief Lila had given her, its embroidered thread soft under her calloused fingers, a fragile tether to hope. Her son slept fitfully, his small chest rising beneath the handkerchief, while her twin daughters whimpered, their pigtails tangled with hay. Sarah's hazel eyes, hollow from exhaustion, stared into the darkness, her mind wrestling with Jonas Cade's promise. Could a man with nothing but a music box truly defy Baraman's greed? Outside, the ranch sprawled under a moonless sky, its barbed wire glinting like teeth. Baraman's laughter drifted from the main house, his silver-buttoned vest catching. The lantern light as he toasted with his men. Cade's a fool, he slurred, flask in hand. He'll come up empty, and them kids'll be mucking stalls by noon. His enforcer, Cal, grunted agreement, sharpening a knife that gleamed with menace. Sarah overheard their words through the stable's thin walls, her heart sinking. she hummed a lullaby, her voice trembling to soothe her children. But it was, as much for herself, a shield against the fear that Jonas's vow was just another lie, like her husband's promises lost to whiskey and cards. Miles away, Jonas urged his sorrel mare through a jagged ravine, the tin box with his sister's map, rattling in his saddlebag. His gray-streaked beard whipped in the wind, his blue bandana damp with sweat despite the chill. The leather pouch at his belt, tied with a red cord, held her letter, its words etched in his soul. "The claim's yours, Jonas, but don't let it curse you like it did Pa." His brown eyes scanned the shadows, wary of bandits or worse. The silver claim, hidden in the hills, was his only hope to raise $600 by dawn. But it meant breaking a vow to leave his family's greed-stained past behind. For Sarah's tearful gaze and her children's frightened faces, he'd face that reckoning. The trail led to a rocky slope, where cottonwoods loomed like silent ghosts. Jonas dismounted, tethering his mare, and climbed to a hidden ledge, his black duster coat snagging on thorns. His hands, rough as sandstone, dug beneath a flat stone, unearthing the tin box. Inside, the map guided him to a narrow crevice, its walls sparkling with silver veins under his lantern's flicker. But as he chipped away, a low growl froze him. A coyote, its eyes glinting in the dark, drawn by the sound of metal on stone. Jonas raised his hand slowly, heart pounding, and the beast slunk away, leaving only the wind's mournful cry. He gathered a small sack of ore, its weight a promise, but time was slipping like sand. Back at the ranch, a soft rap at the stable door jolted Sarah awake. She braced herself, fearing Cal, but the door cracked open to reveal Lila, her red curls tucked under a shawl, her patchwork cloak blending with the night. In her hand, she held a small basket of cornbread and a tin of milk, snuck from the kitchen. "Thought you'd need this," Lila whispered, her green eyes softening as she glanced at the sleeping triplets. "Jonas is out there, moving heaven and earth for you. Don't give up." Sarah's hands trembled as she took the basket, her voice barely audible. "Why's he doing this? He don't even know us." Lila knelt beside her, the lantern casting shadows across her freckled face. "Jonas lost someone once, his sister, to sickness and a cruel landlord. He don't talk much, but he don't let folks suffer if he can help it." She squeezed Sarah's hand, the bluebird handkerchief peeking from her son's grasp. "You're stronger than you know, Sarah. Hold on till dawn." Lila slipped out as quietly as she'd come, leaving Sarah staring at the cornbread, its warmth a faint echo of kindness in a world that had offered her none. Sarah fed her children, small bites, their tiny hands eager despite their fear. She tucked the handkerchief around her son's shoulders, its bluebird a symbol of Lila's faith. Jonas's face, those steady brown eyes, that quiet resolve, flashed in her mind, stirring something she hadn't felt since her husband's early days, before the bottle stole him. But trust was a brittle thing, and dawn loomed like a judge's gavel. Jonas rode hard through the ravine, the sack of silver ore heavy against his thigh. The stars had faded, and the first blush of dawn tinged the horizon. Red Hollow's assay office, where he'd trade the ore for cash, was hours away, and Baraman's deadline was merciless. A sudden crack echoed, a loose rock tumbling down. The slope, or something more sinister? Jonas's hand rested on his revolver, his heart pounding as he spurred his mare onward. In the stable, Sarah's lullaby faltered, her eyes fixed on the sliver of sky through a cracked board. Dawn was coming, and with it, her fate. Would Jonas return, or would Baraman's laughter be the last sound she heard as a free woman? What dangers awaited Jonas in the hills, and could Sarah cling to hope as the night gave way to dawn? As the first rays of dawn bled across the Montana sky, painting Red Hollow's hills a soft gold, Sarah's heart pounded like a trapped bird in the dim stable of Hank Baraman's ranch. The air was heavy with mildew and hay dust, the warped boards groaning under a restless wind. She sat on a straw pile, her faded green shawl draped over her 3 toddlers, their small bodies curled against her tattered muslin dress. Her auburn hair, loose from its wooden hairpin, framed hazel eyes that hadn't closed all night. The bluebird handkerchief, embroidered with Lila's gift of hope, lay across her son's chest, its threads catching the faint light seeping through. A cracked wall. Her twins, their pigtails tangled, clung to her, their whimpers fading into exhausted sleep. Sarah's fingers traced the handkerchief, her mind fixed on Jonas Cade's promise. $600 by dawn to save them from Brahmins. Greed, but as the sky brightened, doubt gnawed at her, sharp as a winter frost. Outside, Barrowman's ranch stirred with menace. Hank himself, his gray vest glinting with silver buttons, stood on the porch of his sprawling house, his black hat tilted low. He sipped from a flask, his hawkish sneer curling as he barked at Cal, the scar-faced enforcer. "Cade's late," he growled, kicking a splintered crate. "Get the woman and her brats ready. They're hauling manure by noon." Cal nodded, his knife gleaming at his belt, its edge a silent threat. Sarah overheard their words through the stable's thin walls, her stomach twisting. She pressed her lips to her son's forehead, whispering, "We'll be all right, little one." But her voice trembled, haunted by her husband's broken vows, lost to cards and ruin. In Red Hollow's dusty streets, Jonas spurred his sorrel mare toward the assay office, the sack of silver ore heavy in his saddlebag. His gray-streaked beard was caked with dust, his blue bandana damp from a sleepless night. His black duster coat flapped in the wind, his brown eyes burning with resolve despite the ache in his bones. The leather pouch at his belt, tied with a red cord, held his sister's letter, its words a quiet anchor. "Don't let the claim curse you, Jonas." He'd chipped silver from the hidden crevice till his hands bled, narrowly escaping a coyote's jaws, but the assay office was his final hurdle. The clerk, a wiry man with ink-stained fingers, weighed the ore, his spectacles glinting. 580, he muttered, scribbling a note. Jonas's jaw tightened. "It's worth more," he said, voice low but firm. The clerk shrugged, unmoved. "Take it or leave it." Jonas clenched his fists, the music box's absence a hollow weight. It sat on Barrowman's table, its crescent moon etching a promise he couldn't yet keep. $20 short, he scanned the office, spotting a notice board pinned with bounties. One caught his eye, a $20 reward for a stolen horse, last seen near the livery stable. It was a risk, but Sarah's tear-streaked face and her children's frightened eyes drove him forward. He pocketed the assay's cash and headed out, his boots crunching gravel, dawn's light casting his shadow long and lean. Back at the ranch, the stable door creaked open, and Sarah's heart leapt, expecting Cal's cruel grip. Instead, Lila slipped inside, her red curls tucked under a shawl, her patchwork cloak dusted with morning dew. She carried a small clay jar of salve, its herbal scent cutting through the stable's stench. "For your hands," she whispered, nodding at Sarah's raw, calloused fingers. "Got it from the cookhouse. You're holding strong, darling." Lila's green eyes softened as she glanced at the triplets, still asleep. "Jonas'll come. He's stubborn as a mule." Sarah's hands shook as she took the jar, her voice barely audible. "I want to believe, Lila, but men's promises break." Lila knelt beside her, her feathered hat brushing the straw. "Jonas ain't always this quiet. He lost his sister to a landlord's cruelty, same as you lost. Your man to debt. It's why he fights for folks like you." She paused, her fingers brushing the bluebird handkerchief over the boy's chest. "You're more than a debt, Sarah. You're a mama, and that sees that." Lila's words kindled a spark in Sarah's heart, though fear still clung like damp cold. She smeared salve on her hands, its warmth easing her pain, and managed a faint nod, clinging to Lila's faith in a man whose face she barely knew. At the livery stable in town, Jonas tracked the stolen chestnut gelding, its blaze, marking clear in the stable hand's tail. The horse stood tethered behind a derelict barn, guarded by a lanky drifter with a rusty pistol. Jonas approached, his revolver low, his voice calm. "That horse is stolen. I'm taking it back for the reward." The drifter sneered, hand twitching, but Jonas's steady gaze held him fast. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be," Jonas said, his brown eyes unyielding. The man backed off, muttering curses, and Jonas led the horse away, the $20 reward secured at the sheriff's office. But as he counted the coins, $600, exactly enough, he heard hooves thundering in the distance, a cloud of dust rising from the trail. Barraman's men, led by Cal, were riding hard toward town, their rifles glinting in the morning light. Jonas tucked the money into his belt pouch, his fingers brushing his sister's letter, a quiet reminder of why he'd come this far. Sarah's courage on that auction block burned in his memory, urging him to race against time. In the stable, Sarah's eyes lifted to the horizon, where dawn's light spilled over the hills. She held her children close, the bluebird handkerchief, a talisman of hope. But as Cal's boots stomped closer, her lullaby faltered, her heart hammering with one desperate question. Would Jonas beat Barraman's men to the square, or would dawn deliver Sarah and her family to a crueler fate? The dawn sky over Red Hollow burned a fierce crimson, as if the Montana hills themselves bled for the drama unfolding below. In the shadowed stable of Hank Barraman's ranch, Sarah knelt on a bed of straw, her faded green shawl draped over her 3 toddlers, their small faces pale with exhaustion. Her auburn hair, freed from its wooden hairpin, spilled across her shoulders, framing hazel eyes that glistened with unshed tears. The bluebird handkerchief, Lila's gift, was tucked around her son's neck, its embroidered threads a fragile beacon of hope. Her twin daughters, their pigtails dusted with hay, slept against her tattered muslin dress, their breaths soft but unsteady. Sarah's hands, raw despite Lila's salve, clutched the clay jar, its herbal scent a faint comfort against the stable's mildew. Jonas Cade's promise, $600 by dawn, hung heavy, but as sunlight pierced the cracked boards, fear tightened her chest. Had she dared to hope for a man she barely knew? Outside, Barraman's ranch buzzed with menace. Hank, his gray vest flashing silver buttons, stood on the porch, his black hat casting a sharp shadow. His sneer twisted as he barked at Cal, the scar-faced enforcer, whose knife gleamed at his belt. "Cade's dust by now," Hank scoffed, swirling his flask. "Drag the woman out. Her brats can scrub pots tonight." Cal's boots crunched toward the stable, his grin cold as a grave. Sarah's heart lurched at the sound, her lullaby faltering as she pulled her children closer, whispering, "Stay quiet, loves." Her husband's gambling debts had stolen her trust, and Jonas's absence felt like another broken vow. In red, Hollow Square, Jonas dismounted his sorrel mare, the $600, $580 from silver ore, $20 from the stolen horse bounty, jingling in his leather pouch tied with a red cord. His gray-streaked beard was matted with sweat, his blue bandana loose around his neck. His black duster coat, frayed but proud, swirled as he strode toward Barraman's table, where the music box sat, its crescent moon glinting defiantly. The crowd parted, their whispers sharp with doubt. Lila, her red curls bouncing under her feathered hat, leaned against a saloon post, her patchwork skirt catching the breeze. Her green eyes flashed with pride as she nodded at Jonas, a silent cheer for the man who'd kept his word. Hank Barraman lounged at the table, his spurs jangling as he eyed Jonas with a predator's glee. "Well, well, Cade," he drawled, thumbing his ledger. "Thought you'd run dry." Jonas slapped the pouch down, coins spilling like a challenge. "600, he said, voice steady as stone. "For Sarah and her kids. Now hand over the music box and let 'em go." The crowd gasped, but Hank's sneer didn't waver. He pocketed the coins, then slid the music box across the table, its wood warm from the sun. "They're yours," he said, eyes glinting with malice. "But don't think this squares us. You've made an enemy, Wrangler." Jonas didn't flinch, tucking the music box into his coat. He turned toward Barrowman's ranch, his brown eyes burning with purpose. Lila caught his arm, her voice low. "Watch your back, Jonas. Hank don't take kindly to losing." Jonas nodded, his fingers brushing the letter in his pouch, his sister's words, a reminder of why he'd fought. Sarah's courage on that auction block, her children's frightened faces, drove him forward. At the ranch, Cal's boots stopped short as a shout echoed from the gate. Sarah's breath caught as Jonas appeared, his duster swaying, the music box in hand. Cal stepped back, glaring as Hank emerged, his sneer fading at the sight of Jonas. "They're free," Jonas said, voice cutting through the morning air. "Take 'em to my place, Lila." Lila, already at the stable door, helped Sarah to her feet, her green eyes warm with relief. Sarah gathered her triplets, their small hands clutching her shawl, the bluebird handkerchief slipping to the straw. She retrieved it, her heart pounding as she followed Lila to a waiting wagon, Jonas's gaze steady behind her. The wagon rattled toward Jonas's homestead, a modest cabin nestled against a stand of pines, its chimney trailing a thin wisp of smoke. Sarah sat in the back, her children nestled against her, their eyes wide with wonder at the rolling hills. Lila drove, humming a saloon tune, her feathered hat bobbing. "Jonas ain't much for talk," she said, glancing back, "but he's got a heart bigger in these plains." Sarah's fingers traced the handkerchief, her voice soft. "Why'd he risk so much for us?" Lila smiled, her eyes distant. "He sees his sister in you, someone the world left behind." The cabin's porch sagged, its windows smudged but warm with morning light. Jonas dismounted, opening the door to a simple room, a cast-iron stove, a patched quilt, a single table. He set the music box down, its crescent moon catching a sunbeam. "You'll stay here," he said, his voice rough but kind. "There's a bed for you and the kids." Sarah hesitated, her hazel eyes searching his face, expecting a price. "What do you want from us?" she asked, voice trembling. Jonas met her gaze, his brown eyes steady. "Nothing but for you to keep 'em safe. That's enough." He turned to the door, adding, "I'll sleep in the lean-to." As he stepped outside, Sarah's heart stirred, a flicker of trust kindling beneath her fear. She tucked her children into the quilt, the bluebird handkerchief a soft shield, but the sound of hooves in the distance, faint but growing, chilled her blood. What shadowed Jonas's kindness, and would Sarah's newfound sanctuary withstand the storm brewing beyond? The pines? The midday sun hung high over Red Hollow, Montana, casting golden light across Jonas Cade's humble cabin, where pine shadows danced on the sagging porch. Inside, Sarah tucked her 3 toddlers beneath a patched quilt, their small faces softened. By sleep, the bluebird handkerchief draped over her son's shoulder like a talisman. Her auburn hair, loose from its wooden hairpin, framed hazel eyes that carried a cautious hope, kindled by Jonas's selfless act. Her faded green shawl hung by the door, her tattered muslin dress dusted with flour from a morning spent kneading cornbread in the cabin's modest kitchen. The hand-carved music box, its crescent moon glinting on the table, seemed to hum with a silent promise, but the faint echo of hooves from the hills beyond the pines chilled her blood. Was it Barrowman's men, or just the wind playing tricks? Jonas stood outside, his gray-streaked beard catching the breeze, his blue bandana knotted loosely at his neck. His black duster coat swayed as he hammered a new plank into the porch, his brown eyes scanning the horizon. The leather pouch at his belt, tied with a red cord, held his sister's letter, its words a quiet weight. "Don't let the claim curse you." He'd paid Sarah's debt, reclaimed the music box, but Hank Barrowman's parting words, "You've made an enemy, Wrangler," lingered like a storm cloud. The cabin, once a solitary refuge, now brimmed with life. Children's laughter. Sarah's soft humming, the scent of warm bread. Yet Jonas knew peace was fragile, and Barrowman's greed ran deeper than a canyon. Sarah stepped onto the porch, a tin cup of coffee in her hands, its steam curling in the crisp air. Her fingers, still raw despite Lila's salve, trembled as she offered it to Jonas. "For you," she said, voice soft but steady, her hazel eyes searching his face. I don't know how to thank you." Jonas took the cup, his calloused hand brushing hers, a fleeting warmth that stirred something unspoken. "No need," he replied, his voice rough but kind. "Just keep 'em smilin'." He nodded toward the cabin, where the triplets' giggles drifted through the open door, chasing the old hound that lounged in the sun. Sarah hesitated, then spoke, her words tumbling out like a dam breaking. "My husband wasn't always a gambler. He was kind once, dreamed of a ranch like this. But the saloon took him, bit by bit, till he left me nothing but debt and a letter saying he was sorry." Her voice cracked, eyes glistening. "I thought I'd never trust again, but you gave us a chance." Jonas listened, his gaze fixed on the pines, his silence a steady anchor. "Folks break," he said finally, his voice low. "But you're mendin', that's enough." A rustle in. The trees snapped their quiet moment. Jonas tensed, his hand resting on his revolver. But it was only Lila, her red curls bouncing under her feathered hat, her patchwork cloak dusted with trail grit. She carried a small, hand-stitched rag doll, its button eyes gleaming, a gift for the triplets from her saloon earnings. "Thought the kids might like this," she said, tossing it to Sarah with a grin. Her green eyes sharpened as she glanced at Jonas. "Word's spreading in town, Jonas. Barrowman sent a man, Travis, his tracker, to sniff around. Says you cheated him out of his property." Lila spat the word, her defiance fierce. Sarah's breath caught, her fingers tightening on the doll. "He won't let us go, will he?" she whispered, her hope flickering. Jonas's jaw set, his brown eyes darkening. "He'll try," he said, voice like gravel. "But I ain't letting him near you." He set the coffee cup down, his gaze meeting Sarah's, a silent vow that steadied her trembling heart. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the ridge, Sarah busied herself in the cabin, scrubbing the stove with a rag, her hands aching but driven by a need to prove her worth. The triplets played with Lila's rag doll, naming it Blue for the handkerchief's bird, their laughter a fragile shield against the growing unease. Jonas chopped wood outside, each swing of the axe a release of the storm brewing within. He'd lost his sister to a landlord's cruelty, buried her with his own hands. Sarah's strength, her fierce love for her children, stirred a resolve he hadn't felt in years, to protect, not just survive. As night fell, Sarah lit a lantern, its glow casting soft shadows across the cabin. She paused by the music box, her fingers tracing its crescent moon, its wood warm under her touch. Jonas entered, his duster coat dusted with sawdust, his eyes weary but kind. "You don't gotta work yourself raw," he said, noticing her reddened hands. "This ain't a debt you owe." Sarah's eyes met his, a flicker of trust blooming beneath her fear. "I'm trying to believe that," she murmured, her voice soft as a prayer. A sudden creak outside broke the stillness. A shadow darted past the window, too swift to be the wind. Jonas grabbed his revolver, his body shielding Sarah as he peered into the dark. The triplets froze, clutching the ragdoll, their eyes wide. Sarah's heart hammered, the bluebird handkerchief slipping from her son's grasp to the floor. Lila's warning echoed in her mind. Travis, Barrowman's tracker, was out there, watching, waiting. What did Travis want in the shadows, and could Jonas shield Sarah's fragile trust from Barrowman's vengeance? The Montana night cloaked Red Hollow in a velvet hush, its stars glinting like scattered diamonds above Jonas Cade's cabin, where a lantern's glow spilled through smudged windows. Inside, Sarah stood frozen, her faded green shawl slipping from her shoulders, her auburn hair loose, framing hazel eyes wide with dread. Her 3 toddlers clutched Lila's rag doll, their small faces pale in the firelight, the bluebird handkerchief tucked into her son's collar, its threads frayed, but steadfast. The shadow that had darted past the window lingered in her mind. Travis, Hank Baramen's tracker, was out there, his presence ablaze against the fragile piece she'd found. Her tattered muslin dress brushed the floor as she stepped toward Jonas, who stood by the door, his revolver in hand, his black duster coat tense across his shoulders. "Stay back," he whispered, his gray-streaked beard catching the light, his brown eyes scanning the darkness. The cabin, once a lonely refuge, now hummed with life, cornbread cooling on the table, the music box's crescent moon glinting softly, the triplets' laughter a memory from the afternoon. But Travis's threat, fueled by Baramen's greed, shattered that warmth. Jonas's voice, low and steady, cut through Sarah's fear. "I won't let him touch you." His blue bandana hung loose, a quiet defiance against the storm brewing outside. Sarah's heart pounded, her trust in Jonas, kindled by his sacrifice, Lila's faith, and the music box's promise, now tested by the shadow's menace. A sharp crack split the night, a rifle shot, grazing the cabin's wall, splintering wood. Sarah gasped, pulling her children behind the table, their whimpers muffled against the rag doll. Jonas ducked low, peering through the window, his revolver raised. "Travis!" he shouted, voice like gravel. "Show yourself!" A chilling laugh answered, echoing from the pines. "Barraman don't like being cheated, Cade," Travis called, his voice oily and sharp. "You took his property. I'm here to collect." Sarah's breath caught, her husband's debts a ghost that refused to fade. She clutched the bluebird handkerchief, its bluebird a fading ember of hope. Jonas slipped outside, his duster blending with the shadows, his boots silent on the frost-kissed ground. Sarah's hands trembled, but she grabbed a fire poker, standing guard by her children, her hazel eyes fierce. Lila burst through the back door, her red curls wild, her patchwork cloak dusted with pine needles. She'd ridden from town, warned by a barmaid's whisper of Travis's plan. "He's alone," Lila panted, her green eyes blazing, handing Jonas a coiled rope from her saddlebag. "Pin him, Jonas. I'll watch the kids." Sarah nodded, her trust in Lila a lifeline, and handed her the rag doll to soothe the triplets. In the pines, Jonas stalked Travis, his revolver steady, the leather pouch at his belt, holding his sister's letter, grounding him. Travis, a wiry man with a weasel's grin, crouched behind a boulder, his rifle glinting. Jonas lunged, tackling him, the rifle skittering into the dirt. Travis fought like a trapped coyote, his knife flashing, but Jonas pinned him with Lila's rope, his strength fueled by Sarah's courage and his sister's memory. "You're done," Jonas growled, dragging Travis to the porch, where Lila bound his hands with practiced ease. Dawn broke, soft and golden, as the sheriff hauled Travis away, Barraman's scheme undone by whispers in Red Hollow's saloons. Hank, humiliated, slunk back to his ranch, his silver-buttoned vest dulled by defeat. Sarah stood on the porch, her children chasing the old hound, their laughter like music. Jonas approached, the music box in hand, its crescent moon polished. Anew, he opened it, revealing a tiny engraving inside, for Sarah chosen by heart, etched with care. Sarah's eyes welled, her fingers tracing the words, the bluebird handkerchief tucked into her pocket. "I lost my sister to a world that didn't care," Jonas said, voice rough but warm. "I swore I'd never let that happen again. This box was hers, but now it's yours, not a debt, but a choice." He fastened it around her wrist, its weight light but profound. Sarah's breath caught, her trust no longer fragile but fierce. I choose you too, she whispered, her hazel eyes meeting his, a vow unspoken but eternal. Spring arrived gently, wildflowers blooming along the porch, lavender, daisies, and forget-me-nots planted by Sarah's steady hands. The cabin smelled of fresh bread and hope, the triplets' giggles mingling with the hounds' lazy barks. Sarah wore a new dress, pale blue, sewn with Lila's help, her auburn hair braided with a ribbon. Jonas, his duster patched, carved a swing for the children, his brown eyes soft with joy. Lila, ever the spark, brought tales from town, her rag doll now a triplet favorite, named Blue for the handkerchief that had seen them through. One evening, under a sky ablaze with stars, Sarah and Jonas sat on the porch, coffee steaming, between them. The music box played its lullaby, a melody of healing. I was no one's but debts, Sarah said, her voice steady. Now I'm a woman you chose, and I'm home. Jonas smiled, his hand covering hers, the letter in his pouch a memory laid to rest. In a world where greed bound hearts like barbed wire, one man stood not to own, but to honor. This wasn't a tale of rescue, but of redemption chosen, of love, forged in fire. If this story stirred your soul, saddle up with Dusty Trail stories. Like, share, and subscribe to ride into more Wild West romances. Hit that bell and tell us, what would you fight for under these stars?